right, welcome to another episode of the Bulldog Bark. I'm yours truly, the Guru. With me today, I got a very special guest, Butler's new Associate Athletic Director for Development and NIL Strategy, Graham Honaker. Graham, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely, man. And hey, congrats on the new job. Super excited to learn more about what that entails today. Before we even get into any of that, though, kind of tell Butler Nation a little bit about your past and your affiliation with Butler University.
Yeah, I've been really blessed. I'm in getting ready to start my 13th year at Butler. I'm not an alum, but I bleed Butler blue. I'm very passionate about the Bulldogs. It's funny, my affiliation probably with Butler goes all the way back to one of Butler's first big NCAA tournament wins in 2001 when they beat Wake Forest. It was 43-10 at halftime. So I was on the other side of the equation. I'm a Wake Forest graduate, and it was my first encounter with Butler. And if you ask Wake Forest fans, they're still in therapy, I think, about that game. But from that point on, from that moment on, I was like, I really had this great admiration for this school that I had heard of in Indiana that, and from there, it really caught my eye. I started paying attention to Butler. And I'll always say my life changed the night of Butler's regional final game against Florida in 2011. So we're talking about the second Final Four run. I was at the University of Louisville at the time. I was in fundraising with their business school, and my wife and I were sitting at dinner, and I'm trying to pay attention to her. We had a rare dinner date because we had like a 1-year-old at the time, but I'm looking at the TV and the game's gone to overtime. Butler wins the game, and I turned to her, I said, that is the greatest achievement I've ever seen in sports, is Butler going to back-to-back Final Fours. And a couple months later, I got on the Butler Jobs website, and I just happened to see a position for development open up. And I put my resume in, not thinking anything was going to happen. And they called me, did 3 interviews here. And by the third time, I was just like, if I get this job, I'm coming here. I love the place. I love the campus. Hinkle, it just felt right. And fortunately got the job, and I've just really loved it. So I've been on the fundraising side for the last 12 years and been involved in some things that we can talk about, but I've really been blessed to be here these 12 years.
Yeah, man. So obviously you've been affiliated with the university for a while now. Kind of talk to us about how this new position came to be. Obviously, we're kind of in the NIL landscape era. Talk to us about again how it came to be and why you ultimately decided to choose it. Obviously, with the new AD this year, Grant Leindecker, you on board. I think I speak on behalf of Butler Nation. We're very excited with you two for the future. But kind of go into again how the position came to be and why you ultimately decided to take it.
Yeah, well, first of all, he's at the top of the list of why I'm taking the job. Big believer in him, his vision. Have gotten to know him over the past year. A lot of energy, obviously a lot of passion. Dyed in the wool, Butler, Bulldog, and love his vision for the university, and not just athletics, but for the university as well. So I was really excited when he, approached me about this initially, and just love his energy, love going over there. I look at it, the academic side obviously is why Butler's a university. It's why we're here. But as we know, Butler athletics plays such a big role in this university. We have so many students or student athletes. We obviously know what the Big East has done, in terms of Butler's visibility. And I want to continue to be in a part of how can I be in the right position to help the university grow. And I felt with my athletics background. So my first project when I came here was the Hinkle renovation. That was like a dream for me. It's like a baseball fan saying, hey, can you help us with Fenway Park or Wrigley Field? And so I worked on that in terms of the fundraising for the first couple of years, have been involved in, different athletics endeavors. So I was comfortable in the athletic space. And then I become, or try to become, comfortable in the NIL space when it's all rapidly evolved. I sort of was thrown into the mix of how do we navigate this as a university? How do we work with all good dogs? So all of that being said is where can I best make a positive difference with my experience, with my love for Butler, and with where this landscape is going, which is ever changing. And it just felt like the right position and the right time for me to take.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And obviously, Barry Collier did amazing things for the university, especially in advancing the athletics program. But definitely excited to have Grant and you on board, kind of injecting some new energy, especially with the new kind of NIL landscape. Maybe dive a little bit into what specifically your job is going to entail as far as NIL development and working with Butler's NIL program or I'm sorry, NIL Collective, All Good Dogs. Dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. So Brandon Crone, the executive director of All Good Dogs, he and I were literally next door neighbors for years. We now live in different places now, but he can't get rid of me. I used to ask him about recruiting when we were out mowing our lawns, and he's doing a great job with All Good Dogs. So from the onset, 2 years ago when All Good Dogs was launched, I would say one of the things I'm proud about that we've done at Butler is we've had a really good mutual relationship with our collective. We've tried to figure out the first thing I'd say in all of this is we have tried hard to how do we make this as Butler way as possible. We can't control the national landscape, all the changes, things people like, they don't like. How can we best make it fit the Butler way, fit the Butler model, do the best for as good as all good dogs, right? The good of all. That's what we're trying to do. So from day one, I've had a really close relationship with Brandon, with the board of directors on how do we build a competitive NIL model. And from my standpoint, having been here 12 years, I've had the benefit of knowing a lot of donors, a lot of athletics donors. We've worked together on different events, cultivation events. We had a couple of dinners last year at Hinkle Fieldhouse that really were effective in building our first, NIL drive per se for All Good Dogs. How are we stewarding those donors? How are we thanking them? We've got different events coming this year with the TBT tournament in July. How do we, from a compliance standpoint, how can we do everything we can from Butler Advancement, the university, to facilitate and help Brandon in his role, help the All Good Dogs in his role, All Good Dogs board in their role to really help our athletic programs where this is so important to our coaches.
Yeah, so you mentioned TBT in there, which we're all obviously very excited about this summer. Has there been a push, by Grant and by you to get former players more involved? It feels like with TBT, and then I saw your recent post on All Good Dogs with Kamar Baldwin. Shove and Max been much more present. I feel like at games. Has there been a push to kind of involve past players in the current athletics program?
It's a huge emphasis, and I would say not just men's basketball, but all sports. I've been fortunate to be at some other universities and have seen how they bring their former student athletes back into the fold. And that's actually something I discussed with Grant coming over to this job. Is that something that's really important to me? Probably from a selfish standpoint, is I get to know the Kamar Baldwins, the Andrew Shravitzes, the Alex Barlows. I really am fortunate to have those relationships. So I want to see them come back, but how can we keep them involved in not just those personal relationships and that relationship with the university, but what are we doing strategically? How might they help? How they want to be involved, but we need to keep them educated and give them avenues to do so. And then obviously with Grant, playing those two Final Four teams and having great connections with that group of guys. Then you have Brandon Crone with his connections. But how are we keeping it a family? But I also want to do that with make that a bigger emphasis with all of our sports here, not just men's basketball.
Yeah, so maybe building off of that a little bit, Butler obviously also has not just a men's basketball program, they have women's basketball, they have football, they have, cross country, soccer, they have a bunch of great sports, both men's and women's. Kind of talk to us a little bit about how, you go about allocating funds to different programs. If, are there way that people can, or fans can, determine, hey, I want to donate towards basketball, or hey, I want to make sure my funds are donated towards, cross country or track and field or soccer. Maybe dive into that a little bit.
Well, one thing, and I think part of my goal too is, along with my colleagues, is we need to continue the education piece of how the model works, the All Good Dogs model works. Because I'm not sure everybody realizes you can make a gift to All Good Dogs and designate it to whichever sport you choose to. It just so happens the majority of our donors, especially when we got this thing off the ground, we're giving to men's basketball. We have a donor who's giving generously to cross country, actually for NIL. One of the things that we've made a real stride in this past 3 months is for our women's basketball team next year. We've had several donors step up, and then we've had about 9 or 10. We'll probably release them at some point this summer, area businesses that are going to partner with a women's player to work with them to promote their business, which is great, right? So we want to help as many sports as possible, knowing that, quite frankly, a lot of our donors want, you know, they're big basketball season ticket holders. That's where their passion is. That's great. But if you have an interest in another sport, you can make a gift to All Good Dogs and designate it specifically for that sport. But we've definitely made a big jump in our women's basketball NIL moving to next season.
That's awesome, man. So, looking forward to the future, what are kind of some of your short-term and long-term goals for development and NIL, with this new position that you have?
I think there are a number of goals. Obviously, NIL is a big priority for grants coming into this position for our coaches. For me personally, I still actually haven't started the new position until next week. So I'm moving my office right now from Jordan to Hinkle, which is a fun move. So I'm gonna, really have to work on what are those concrete goals that, Grant that fit into his strategy. I know for me personally, education is a big one for me. I think we still can have a lot of room to grow in terms of educating the masses on. A lot of people still don't know how the All Good Dogs model works. And like I said earlier, we've tried to make it as Butler way as possible. And people have been more receptive to the idea when they find out, oh, All Good Dogs is working with 13 not-for-profits in the area. And oh, I didn't know they were going to Riley Children's Hospital or volunteering with a kid again around Christmas time. That education piece is really big to clarify how we are trying to navigate this thing. And again, to do it the Butler way, but that it's benefiting the student athletes, but it's also benefiting a lot of people in this community. So the education piece, and then working with Brandon and the athletic department on the student athletes have to be at the foremost of everything that we're doing. Are we providing them with the financial literacy that they need in terms of how they're navigating it? I always worry not necessarily about our student athletes, but our athletes across the country are getting advice on paying taxes, on investing their money, on saving their money, on marketing and branding. So I'm intrigued about what we can do from this sort of holistic model. I think one of the things that gets lost is this can be a really additional educational experience for a student here to learn about. Again, I didn't know about taxes when I was in college. I found out the hard way, right? But to learn about that process, to learn about your personal brand, which is so important for all of us, but especially if you're going to be representing, when I'm thinking about these women's basketball players next year, how they represent these companies is going to be really important to them, to the company, but also for the Butler program. So that hopefully this year one went well, and they'll all say, "Hey, we want to do this again." So I think that holistic education of NIL for not just our fans, but our student athletes is really important. I'm a really, really competitive person, so I want our programs to be as well suited as they possibly can for us to compete in the Big East or the Pioneer League or where we are right now. I want us to be as competitive as possible, and that leaves, for me, that's always meant leaving no stone unturned in terms of fundraising. The other big project I was involved with for about 6 years was the Dugan Hall at Lacey School of Business. Building that building along with several others, that was our life here. That was a $44 million building. And it took every gift, every $25 gift, $25,000 gift. We were fortunate to get a $25 million gift. All of those helps. And so I think the other message I have is to your audience is every gift helps us. every tweet helps us. Every spreading what the All Good Dogs model is trying to accomplish helps us. It's not just the large gifts. I've been doing this my whole life. I value every gift that comes in. They matter, they make a difference. And especially with us, who we don't have an exceptionally large alumni base, we have as passionate an alumni base as any in the country. That's so important. And then I think that the final goal for me personally is learning as much as I can. I've spent a lot of hours since I've accepted the job of reading and listening. I was listening to an hour-long podcast this morning on NIL branding and working with companies, and there's a million articles just this week on the lawsuit and the settlement. I want to be as well-versed in this as anyone in my position in the country to help, hopefully, Butler be competitive.
I like what you said there about the small gifts, because I think there is this misconception that it only is like these big donors. And not that's not to take away. Big donors matter. That's not what I'm saying. But if everyone was to contribute just a few dollars here and there, it adds up, right? And like you said, we don't have we're a small private school. It's not we don't have a huge alumni base. But hey, if just the base was to contribute $10, that's like 2 cups of coffee at Starbucks a month. You know, it's amazing what impact that can make.
There was a community drive from the Butler fan boards, message boards, that I won't give the exact number because I don't have it myself, but it was substantial. And it was based on a couple hundred people making contributions. So that all those gifts help. I also would say I never like to settle that, hey, we're not a big fan base. I never like to also have that limit my personal expectations of what can be accomplished. I know how competitive our coaches are, our athletic administrators. I know Grant's a really competitive person. I don't like settling. I don't like saying, well, we're the smallest. Again, I came from a small school at Wake, so I think I've always been in this mindset of think big, think big. Actually, when I took this job, one of the things I talked with Grant about was I really want to be in an environment where we're thinking big, and he absolutely assured me he would be, and I have no doubt that he'll be thinking big. But so yes, every gift counts, but no settling. Let's think big of what we can accomplish here.
I like it. So again, looking towards the future, I know we talked about your goals. Where are maybe some areas of kind of opportunity that you see for Butler specifically, and then also maybe where are some areas or some hurdles that you could see for Butler in this new NIL landscape?
So I think from an advantages standpoint, there's no fan base I've been around that's more passionate and loyal than Butler people. They love the university. They, not everybody loves NIL, but I think people now realize it is here to stay, and they do realize that again, what we've talked about at the onset, a good Butler athletics program has an impact on this university. So we have great fans, we have great support. We're also in a great city. We're in a great city in Indianapolis that has tremendous companies, corporations. How are we engaging with them? We talked a bit about that with what is going to happen with women's basketball next year and some of those partnerships. How do we continue to grow our involvement there? We have some really unique assets. I give many tours of Hinkle Fieldhouse, and I brought a group in last week, and half of the group had never been in there. And it never ceases to amaze me the reactions that you get from folks who've seen Hinkle for the first time. That's a unique asset. Have we leveraging that? We also have leaders at both of the entities that I've talked about in terms of our athletic department now and All Good Dogs, who have been basketball players here who have wide networks with the Butler basketball community and the basketball community in general. So I think those are great opportunities. Being in the Big East, it's been the best basketball conference, in my opinion, for several years now. How are you leveraging that, with NIL, with your donors? I think, again, part of that's going to be on my shoulders in terms of that education piece. How are we maximizing every opportunity we can here to get better, be the best, and also stay within the Butler model, the Butler way? And I think that the last thing I said is that the Butler way is a unique brand asset that we have as well, that we can utilize, market, and yet we've got to make sure we stay consistent and true to it in how we're adopting our NIL. I think the challenges we have are no different than a lot of the schools out there, but someone reminded me, Butler's not the only school dealing with these challenges, and I agree. I think one of the biggest aspects is again education. It's so important that we're educating people, and it's tough, right? Because all of this is new and it's changing. But how are we educating them on how the All Good Dogs model works, on how NIL works? And we're probably going to have to change our pitch next week and the week after that because it's continuing to change. So how we're keeping on top of that, I think, is a challenge. But I wouldn't have taken the job if I didn't see the opportunities. I look at opportunities rather than challenges, and I love a new challenge, and certainly we'll have them here. But we've got the right people at Butler. We have an amazing fan base. We have a great group of coaches, and we're in a terrific place in Indianapolis. So I'm excited and ready to go.
Well, I know I speak on behalf of Butler Nation when I say we're very excited as well. And obviously, I'm not going to ask for exact numbers here or anything like that. But, NIL has kind of been around for, I think last year was our first kind of full year of having All Good Dogs and the NIL collective and everything like that. How have you seen a progression in funds, maybe activity from fan base? With All Good Dogs. How have you seen that progression from year one to year two?
Absolutely. I am really, really grateful for our donors to All Good Dogs in the NIL program. We have made a substantial jump from year one to year two. Really grateful for everybody that's been involved. Year one was really, we were all just trying to build the airplane, as we were trying to fly it, learn about how everything was going on, reaching out to donors. And we still had great support. This second year, as people have become more accustomed to what All Good Dogs means, what they do. Brandon Crone's done a great job of getting out in the community, marketing that program, recruiting those first year donors to come back and support us, finding new donors, promoting again what these players are doing in the community. We've made a really, really sizable jump. Um, you know, every year we got to keep building on that. We're not where we want to be, but I'm very pleased. I know Grant is as well with the increase from year one to year two. So we want to keep that going. And like I said, we want to make sure how are we helping other sports as well here at Butler. So it's a monumental task, but we're here for it. But I'm really, really grateful for the donors who stepped up initially, not necessarily knowing what this is all about, but we need to do it. And then the second year, people have really stepped up even further.
That's awesome, and obviously very exciting to know that there's been some really good progression, from year one to year two. Um, if someone wanted to learn more about how they can contribute to All Good Dogs or the NIL, or had any questions about how all that works, how could a Butler fan go about doing that?
Yeah, first of all, my new office is third floor of Hinkle Fieldhouse. So love to have you over, buy you a cup of coffee. Send me an email, T Honaker, that's THONAKER at butler.edu, or give me a call, 317-940-8732. Love to chat with you more.
Well, hey, Graham, I really appreciate your time. A lot of great information there. Super excited for the future with you on board. And again, congrats on the new position. And as always, go dogs.
Go Dogs. Thanks so much for having me.